Obviously, you all know me. I think I'm Kevin Krause with AIA. Happy to have you all here this morning. Thank you for coming. This is our second iteration of this. We've been trying to do these for groups that specifically are interested in moving forward on the wellness side. As you know, we have our Discover Health portfolio that has a whole host of programs and services that we've designed it so each employer can pick and choose what works for them in that regard and try to marry that or complement what the carriers can provide as well. So we're here today to kind of highlight the newest cadre of programs which are kind of coupled together. They can be separate, but they can also be worked together, and that's the Biosygnia Know Your Numbers Biometric Screening Report coupled with the Doctors Direct Healthcare nurse coaching system. So we're happy to have you. I think when you go through and hear what you're going to see today, all this whole wellness effort, when you boil it down, is about behavior change. And what we've been struggling with over the last 5 years is how do we find programs and services that will actually stimulate and enlighten people to want to make the changes they need to make, and then to have support mechanisms for them to do that. And I think this combination of programs we're very excited about. We initially started this 3 years ago with a prior vendor that actually didn't work out as well as we had hoped. And we have just recently moved to these folks, who I'll introduce in a second. And what we've learned is really that behavior change is the key, and I think what you're going to see from these programs is something different in the market. We're happy to have a couple of our carrier partners here today, Capital Blue Cross and Highmark as well, who are very interested in what we're doing. So we're happy to have them, and thank them for coming. Mark Ruby's with Biosygnia. He's going to take you through the first part. I forget your title, Mark, but he's like the czar of something.
Vice President of Business Development and Innovation.
Czar of Innovation. And Tina is an empress of something. Tina is an RN and heads up the nurse coaching model, which we're very excited about. As you're going to learn, it came out of a physician IPA practice, so it's very strong clinical basis from it. And so I think I'll shut up and let them talk. We are being recorded, so and I hear that Chuck does have edit capabilities.
That's right.
Have anything that
so if anybody scratches their ear, he'll have to edit it out. Well, anyway, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming this morning. And Tina and I flew in yesterday. And Tina's from North Carolina, so snow is somewhat familiar, but she doesn't like to see it. I grew up north, so I'm used to snow. But anyway, what we'd like to do today is really talk to you about what we feel is a program that does really change behavior. And as Kevin was talking about, one of the big issues out there is that to change behavior, there has to be a compelling reason to change. And I assume all of you are familiar with health risk assessments and how they work and the type of information that the traditional health risk assessment provides, which is generally there's a health screening involved, and the output report generally provides a health score and information on whether your cholesterol is high or low. But generally that's the extent, and unfortunately that's not enough actionable information and knowledge really to get people to begin the behavioral change process. Because when you talk to people who have made major lifestyle changes and you ask them what was the catalyst, generally it's somebody in their family, immediate family, who's had a heart attack, a massive stroke, or has gone through complications with diabetes and has lost a leg to diabetes, and they see themselves mirrored in that person. And so they have their moment, and they begin that change process. And a lot of people don't have that happening, to them, say, this year, next year, the year after, but they're carrying a lot of risk. And so with that, what we feel with Know Your Number is we're providing that surrogate compelling reason to begin that change process. So we've kind of taken the health risk assessment from what we call X-ray technology, which is kind of a one-dimensional look at what's going on, to more of a CAT scan approach, kind of a multi-dimensional look at what's going on with your health inside. So with that, as a company, we have three areas. The areas we're talking about today, obviously, is healthcare. And Biosygnia was formed back in 1996. And we had the good fortune of having the ability to develop disease modeling algorithms that were very unique. What that allowed us to do is bring all of the relevant information out there on various risk factors for the onset of a disease state and bring all of those outcomes information together to build very robust, what we call morbidity models, which is looking at your risk of getting disease. But the other thing we're able to bring to the table is how much of that risk is under control, how much of it is modifiable. And what we're able to do with the output report to the individuals provides a very compelling reason to change. And so you'll see that as we go through. So as the company, as I mentioned, we started in 1996. We spent about 4 or 5 years initially as an academic endeavor because we have a lot of PhD scientists, physicians, and they actually built the models. And we were smart enough to know that not only was this going to be used in employer wellness, but because it looks at disease risk, that it was going to be used in medical management. And that is really what has happened over the years, is that Know Your Number initially is used looking at wellness, but if people have diabetes or heart disease or stroke, they're at high risk for the comorbidities. But you have the same issue. You have to have a compelling reason to stay healthy. And a lot of type 2 people with diabetes that have type 2 don't necessarily see that. And so they're not really keeping themselves healthy. And so they're on that road to an issue. And so with Know Your Number, it plays in both areas. So with that, we made sure it was very well validated. So Know Your Number was launched in 2001 as a separate product for employer wellness, and we worked through distribution partners. So we worked with companies that provide wellness coaching and disease management. And one of our first distribution partners was Doctors Direct Healthcare. And they came to us in 2001 and said, look, we looked at all the other HRAs out there, and what we found was this type of approach is very compelling. So they came on as one of our first distribution partners. And so with that, we've obviously expanded. We're national. We work with a lot of different organizations. But with Doctors Direct, given that they're down in Fayetteville and we're up in Raleigh, North Carolina, we built this very close relationship. And last summer, we started talking about, doesn't it make sense to come together, because they had integrated Know Your Number in their wellness, disease management, population management approach. And so with that, we came together in August of 2012 formally. And so Doctors Direct is an operating division of Biosignature. So we work very closely together. And so today, I'll talk to you about the Know Your Number and how you get the behavior change process started. And Tina will be talking about all the wraparound services to really make it happen, the coaching, the screenings, etc. We also have another division which we won't talk about today, but we have a advanced underwriting tool for the life insurance industry. Basically, our disease models, we also look at mortality from the life insurance standpoint, and so our new underwriting tool is about 30% more accurate than the traditional underwriting methodology. And so we market to life insurance companies too, but that's a separate thing. What I want to talk to you about is really when you look at a population, this could be if you're a health plan or you're an individual organization, your people or your members fall in 4 areas. You have people who are healthy and they maintain that health status throughout their whole life, but you have a huge amount of people carrying a lot of risk factors. Okay? They may or may not be aware of it. What surprisingly is that when you do screenings, you generally find anywhere from 30 to 50% of the people screened do not have a primary care physician record. It's not because they don't have insurance. There's a little bit of the laziness factor, the denial factor going on, and it's heavily skewed towards men. Men under 50 generally don't see a physician unless they hurt their leg playing basketball or they've got a sore throat. Okay? So guess what? The importance of them understanding that they're carrying a lot of risk factors now falls upon the programs that we're talking about today. Getting to those people to give them the actual knowledge to begin the behavioral change and engage with the physician. So you have people with high risk moving to active disease, okay, because they're carrying risk factors. And then you have people who have CHD, diabetes, and they're not taking care of themselves, so they move to disease complications. And obviously, from there, you move to catastrophic illness. And so the key thing is when you manage a population, obviously for disease management, case management, you're looking at claims data, cost data. You're trying to find who's going to be the next high-cost utilizer so you get them into case management to be much more efficient. The thing is that to catch these people, you really have to look at clinical data. And that's really where wellness programs come into place. So with Know Your Number, where Know Your Number plays is it looks obviously at your risk for getting disease and how much it is modifiable. So It fits here, and it also fits with individuals who already have, say, CHD or heart disease. And so with that, I mentioned earlier, the issue of generating awareness. If you're not going to a physician, you're generally not aware. So that's the first thing we do through our report, is create that awareness. And then with that, then you're able to start the engagement process, the behavioral change, and the motivation. And because we look at disease risk and how much is modifiable, at the aggregate reporting level, we give employers and organizations information that they can't get anywhere else. And that's been validated over and over because we're used with Fortune 500 companies, we're used with the majority of companies, obviously fall between 50 employers and 1,000. And when the CFOs and the head of HR sees those type of aggregate reports, their eyes light up. So with that, I'd like to now move into what we're talking about. You've got to start with the individual. And so generally, this would be a member or an employee. And the big issue is, how do you communicate risk? Okay? Now, I do have a short story. Kevin always gets on me about this story because he likes it. But I grew up about 10 years in the diabetes area. So I was involved with glucose monitoring back when it started. Okay? So I'm dating myself. But back then, physicians did not believe that people could glance their finger, put a drop of blood on a strip, wipe it off, put it in a glucose meter, take that reading, and adjust the insulin. They didn't believe it could be done. They said children can't do it, older people can't do it, people with lower levels of education can't do it. Well, guess what happened? The Juvenile Diabetes Foundation was the big driver of this because obviously for type 1s, those are generally children that are diagnosed at adolescents. Well, all the infrastructure was built around it. The diabetes nurse educator role was formed to provide the education to the individual. You had the home health care dealers, which already dealt with people for medical devices and training them. And you went to the insurance companies, and then you got the endocrinologists on board. Well, guess what happened? It was a game changer for diabetes management because now people were able to manage their disease on a daily basis versus every 90 days. They were in much better control. You had better outcomes. What was the key thing? You're providing that person a key piece of actionable information, that glucose reading, which allowed them to free up their lifestyle. They could take their insulin before each meal. It wasn't like old Aunt Edna or Uncle Charlie who was taking intermediate active insulin and that would drop right in at noontime, so he had to eat at a certain time for lunch, dinner, breakfast. That removed it. So it really freed up lifestyle and outcomes. Well, that's the key thing here is if you can provide an individual with the information they need, they will begin the change process. And that's really what Know Your Number is about. So from a standpoint of the disease states that we look at, and basically Know Your Number is available online, and for those organizations that still want the paper questionnaire, obviously that's available. But we look at the key diseases that drive about 80% of the costs in the country. Heart disease onset. If you already have heart disease, we provide you risk for second major recurrence. Diabetes, type 2 diabetes onset. We also have a diabetes progression module, which looks at people who already have diabetes, their risk for the comorbidities. Stroke onset. If you're over 40, we look at your risk for heart failure onset. If you're a smoker, we look at COPD and lung cancer onset. And through the screening processes, you pick up these various states: metabolic syndrome, pre-hypertension, hypertension, and also readiness to change states. And it's available in Spanish, so the reports and the questionnaire and the output's all available in Spanish. So with that, let's kind of move on to just a little bit. I mentioned earlier about the science. It is very well validated. We work very closely with Duke University and University of Washington. They validated the basic statistical methodology. They use it in various initiatives within their organizations. And also they have co-authored peer-reviewed publications with us. So these are in academic medical journals. And on top of that, it's been used obviously in the market for over 8 years. So this is the process. It's a very crisp questionnaire. The next slide will show you the paper version. But basically, it's a limited health history. We're talking totally 26 questions. If you're a smoker, there's a few more, but it's very crisp. It's not a 60 questionnaire type form where you get tired of answering the questions. So it's, do you have heart disease? Do you have stroke? Do you have diabetes? We have the GINA, non-GINA version. So if you have a program that allows you to ask family health history questions, there's a version of that for Know Your Number. There's also the GINA version. Exercise levels, smoking, how long you smoked, and it's married to the key biometrics, which is this is the same information that's collected on a general health risk assessment. Your blood pressure, pulse, waist circumference, height, weight, which is your BMI, and fasting glucose and lipid panel. It goes into the basically the statistical engine, and the output basically for the individual, the run page report looks like this, and there's also an individualized health letter. So this is the paper version of the questionnaire. You can see it's very crisp, and what I'd like to do now is move into the report, because that's really where everything happens. For the individual, the upper part is their review of their biometrics. The middle part is looking at their actual disease risk, so this is for the health coach or the physician. The bottom report really is what is conveyed to the individual. This is really how they are able to understand what the risk is. So the first part is just kind of looking at this in a much larger kind of sense, is these are the biometrics. So in the value column, anything in red is outside the normal range. Everybody is familiar with blood pressure, pulse, cholesterol, etc. If they're viewing this report online, these are all linked to explanations of exactly what they are. But the key thing is if we move further into the report, what I want to talk to you about is really the risk, because this is where it starts. And this is where Know Your Number is very unique in the marketplace. We have U.S. patents on our algorithms. And so with that, obviously we're able to utilize that to look at risk in different ways. The first risk we look at is your 5-year risk for getting the various diseases. So this person we made up as a sample where they didn't already have a disease. So obviously, if they had diabetes, there wouldn't be a risk for diabetes there. But let's look at diabetes. This person, based on their previous risk factors, which is their biometrics, how they filled out the questionnaire, puts them in a 9.2% for getting type 2 diabetes in the next 5 years. Okay? The second risk we look at, and this is very unique, is how much of that 9.2% is in your control. So based on this person's profile, 70% of that 9.2% risk is directly in their control. In other words, it's modifiable risk factors that they can get down to the top of normal. They can remove 70% of that. Now, we also look at your peer group risk, which is your percentile risk. How do you compare to your peers? Because when you think about it, if you were working as a physician or a coach with that person, and you said, well, you have a 9-point mark, you have a 9.2% chance of getting type 2 diabetes in the next 5 years, well, I'd flip it and say, well, that means I have a 91% chance of not getting it. Because I don't understand what risk really means. That 9.2% is a relatively high risk. It's something I need to be concerned about. So what we do is we look at their percentile risk, their peer group. So that 9.2% puts them in the 78th percentile compared to the people the same age and gender as them. So that means 77% of the people have less risk than they do. So what we do is we now show it in a visual story. So this first bar chart looks at their risk compared to their peer group. So very quickly, they can see for heart disease, they're above the 80th percentile, which puts them in relatively high risk. Same for stroke. Diabetes, they're above average. Heart failure, they're in the average range, but because they're smokers, obviously they're above average for COPD and lung cancer. So again, when you think about it, this is providing them information in a way that they can understand. People understand being compared to their peer group. They're growing, obviously you get graded on school and everything, so you're used to that. Now, this is kind of your, if you want to call it a window into your internal health, that's really what it is. It's letting you kind of see, okay, what's going on inside. Now, this is the bad news. The good news is I can get my risk down to average risk or below risk. So I get it down to the target risk. So the next logical question is, okay, you got my attention. I understand what a red bar means. Now, what can I do about it? Well, obviously, the other thing that's important is how do your risk factors that are modifiable, how do they impact your modifiable risk? And so if we just touch it there, what we're able to do very uniquely is show them the various risk factors that they have that's modifiable and how much they individually contribute to the amount of modifiable risk they have for each disease. So remember, we made this person a smoker. Well, look how much smoking is contributing. The white bar, part of the portion of the right bar, look how much it's contributing to each of these diseases. Now, a smoker knows about lung cancer. They probably know about COPD, but a lot of them are not familiar with the risk that smoking provides or carries for diabetes and stroke. And so what you have now is an opportunity from a counseling standpoint. Just think about it. I mean, we go to physicians. Physicians, one of one of the things that we find out is that when people have this report run on, they take it to the doctor. And we get a lot of calls from physicians saying it's one of the best communication tools they've ever seen because they've got the same problem. They're talking to about their biometric risk. They've done it year after year. You got to lose weight. We got you on a blood pressure medication. You need to start exercising more. Your lipids, we got to get them down. But they come back in 3 months and 6 months, and you see very little change. The reason is that people don't understand exactly what does it mean if I don't, get myself healthy. And so this is kind of the train wreck that's coming down for them. But here's how you can begin that change process. So let's say a smoker says, I'm not ready to stop smoking. Well, pick one. It doesn't matter which one, pick one. Well, if they start exercising, guess what? They're going to significantly lower their risk if they start exercising. So it's a way of giving people the visual confirmation of what the risk is, but a pathway to change. So we feel that this is very compelling, and we've seen it over the last 8 years. The other thing we've seen is that employers are looking for information like this for their employees because, quite frankly, their employees need it. They need this type of information because when you ask people what their risk is for disease, they don't know. They may know that they have a BMI problem, they may know they have a cholesterol, blood pressure problem, but if you really ask them, what does that mean for your risk for getting heart disease, stroke, diabetes, they have no idea. Well, if you have no idea, why are you going to change? It's almost like when you cross a railroad. You're not going to sit on that railroad because you know that there's going to be a train coming down there. So you want to get off that railroad track. Well, it's the same thing here. People need to know that there's a train coming. And there could be a train wreck here in the next 4 or 5 years if they don't start doing so. So there's an individualized health letter that's attached to this, by the way. It's in 4th and 5th grade reading level comprehension, and it goes over the report and take action on it. So it's also in your packet there. So when we look at this individual, what we're able to do is, okay, they may know their biometrics, and we may be able to, obviously, to identify if they have metabolic syndrome, but the key thing is we're providing them 2 other key pieces of information that they can visually recall. And I think that's important. They can see it in their mind. So with that, I think what we've done is started the behavior process, as far as going forward. Now, for the employer or the organization, we provide the same thing in the aggregate reporting. And so what we're able to do is not only look at what's going on through biometrics, which they have right now, but we're able to take that information and actually provide whatever their burden is for the disease, in other words, individually. So if we kind of look at this, if we go to the next slide here, this would be an aggregate report, a baseline for an employer whose population went through screening. And so there's around 2,200 people. This is a review of the demographics on the previous page. This is a review of their clinical measures. So in other words, how many people, had BMI is greater than 30, etc. But this actually now looks at what's going on from a risk standpoint. If you look at this top part of this report up here, if you recall in the individual report, when we looked at their peer group risk, remember the red bar and the green bar? Well, this is the same thing here for the total population. So there was 2,200 employees who were screened. Of the 2,200, 21% were in the 80th percentile or greater. So this would be the red bar. So that's relatively high risk. Above average for type 2 diabetes is 20% of that screened population. So you have 41% of your population had a greater than 60th percentile peer group risk if you combine those 2 groups. So very quickly they can see what's going on. Now this is looking at how many new cases will occur in the next 5 years. This is what gets the employer's attention because we're able to predict how many new cases of diabetes, heart disease, and stroke will occur in that population in the next 5 years, and more importantly, how many will be avoided. And so if you look up here for type 2 diabetes, in that 2,200 people, there's going to be 78 new cases of type 2 diabetes that will occur in that population in the next 5 years. We know how much risk is individual and modifiable at your individual level, but we know that 66 of those 78 cases are potentially avoidable, which means in the screening population, if everybody got all their modifiable risk factors down to the top of normal, you could theoretically eliminate 66 of those 78 cases. Now, in the real world, we know that won't happen, but just think about it. From an employer standpoint, now they know by disease how many new cases and how many of them are avoidable. And with that piece of information, and can tell you what happens is when they see 60, 70, or 80% of the new cases of those chronic diseases that are going to occur in the next 5 years are potentially avoidable, what you do is you have a paradigm shift to a business issue, because if you had a process inside your organization that had 60, 70, 80% of inefficiency rates, you'd be throwing dollars at it. And that's the type of information that's very actionable for the employer. Now, we even go a step further. And this chart here, we know how many of those avoidable cases of each disease that is directly related to each of the modifiable risk factors. So in this screen population, I believe there's 125 avoidable cases of the 6 chronic diseases that we look at. I believe 66 or 65 of those cases are directly related to weight, and we can show them by disease. So there's 40-some avoidable cases of diabetes, 5 cases of heart disease, 10 cases of stroke, etc. So guess what? We provided the employer a window to their internal health, and we look at these previous slides here, report pages that looks at the burden and how much of it's avoidable. Now we're able to provide them strategic information on the pathway to change. If I've got a weight management program, I'm investing a certain amount of money. If I'm looking at this and saying over 50%, I can validate over 50% of the avoidable cases of disease by these 6 principal diseases are directly related to weight, well, that's certainly an incentive to say if we're going to spend more money, where we're going to allocate it to the best outcomes. And so then we overlay the national treatment costs. Generally, employers don't know exactly, unless they're very large, how much it costs to treat an average case of heart disease or stroke, so we take the national numbers. So for this group of 2,200 people, there's going to be $4.3 million of disease cost burden coming down the pipeline in the next 5 years. And we know how many avoidable cases, so it's easy to do that. 3.2 billion of that is potentially avoided. We can compare it to the national average, and then we can extrapolate to the full population. So what you have now is the financial side of the picture. And a lot of the CFOs that work with us actually will go back and they'll look at the longevity of a typical employee at their company and factor those financials by 1.2, 1.5, 1.7 on the length of service, because they want their legacy costs. And so the other piece here, which the employer doesn't see, is we look at your current risk, your modifiable, and your percentile. Well, with that, you can now look at that population and triage it for wellness and disease management in a very unique way. If you look at diabetes here, this is just a portion of the database because we look at heart disease, stroke, heart failure, COPD, and lung cancer. But for diabetes, we know what your current risk is. So some people are previously diagnosed, but this person here has a 49% chance of getting type 2 diabetes in the next 5 years. Okay? We know how much of your risk is modifiable. So this 49%, 96% is modifiable for this person. So they can get their risk theoretically down to 1.8%. So the difference is 47.2% of absolute modifiable risk. Now think about it. You've got 2,200 people. You cannot expend the same amount of resources in managing each of those individuals. What you want to do is saying, how can we triage this to maximize outcomes? Well, if you look at stratifying by absolute modifiable risk, well, which people are you going to want to get into a program and really get them incentivized? Is these people here who have high modifiable, absolute modifiable risk. These people down here, 70-80% of their risk might be modifiable, but they only have a 2 to 3% risk. Okay, so think about this. You rank order by each disease, and you look at the top 20%. What we found is that 60 to 70% of the avoidable cases in the next 5 years are coming from that subgroup. So now you have a methodology here for wellness and disease management. The organization that's providing those services can now triage better, because this is not something that shows up in claims. And so this is what we show the employers over here. So for the employer, they can't see the individual information, but up here, of the 65 avoidable cases of type 2 diabetes, which is up in this row right up here, 48 of them are coming from the top 400 people. The other 18, there's only 18 cases. And the same for heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. So I believe 88 of the 100 and some avoidable cases are coming from that subgroup of 400 people. And that's very unique. So I think in summary, and I'll turn the presentation over to Tina so you can see how Know Your Number fits in to the coaching and the screening process, what we do here is, I think, provide actionable knowledge in a very unique way to the individual, because it starts with them. We give them their window to their internal health, a pathway to change through that one-page report. That report also connects them to their health professional, because that's a report that physicians understand and they like, and we have that feedback for the last 8 years they love. And so it gives that, you provide a communication bridge. And then for the coach, think about it, the coach now has the report, and they can work with the individual. For the employer, we've given them an agri report that provides them the same information, because the employer needs to be engaged, and they're starving for this type of information because they can't get this off the regular insurance. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tina.
We'll trade spots and then you can get the southern flair. So total different accent, just come along with me a little bit. So Mark has gone through a lot of the information that generally we trade off and share back and forth. The biggest key is obviously the Know Your Number tool. That sort of, as he said, gives you that roadmap to move forward. The key in moving forward is developing relationships. Individuals are not going to change unless they feel that there's an incentive for them to do that. A lot of times that's money from the employer saying, okay, if you'll do this, then I'll give you an incentive, a break on your premium, or I'll give you something else. So a lot of times that is the driver for participation. The other key to that is that moment where they look at the tool and say, holy cow, I had no idea that smoking impacted me in that way all across the board to those 5 of those 6 diseases. I had no idea that 30 extra pounds carries that much impact in heart disease and diabetes, and now what do I do about it? And the key to what do I do about it is really where Doctors Direct comes in. Our background, as Kevin mentioned earlier, was started from an IPA in Fayetteville, North Carolina. In the community, we had employers coming to the physicians and saying, we need a program. Our cost is ridiculous here in the community. We had basically a one hospital system town, and they were buying up a lot of the small practices, and the employers were seeing increasing costs. So they came to us and said, help us manage the health care. What can we do about that? So the physicians went to the hospital and did a program together with them. So in '99, after being accosted in the parking lot by our president, who is a general surgeon, and said, okay, you've worked ICU and emergency room for 15 years. Are you ready for something different? So me being stupid and knowing nothing about the insurance healthcare side, I was like, well, how different? What are you talking about? Well, I want you to work with physicians. I want you to work with employees that are out there that need to understand a little bit about their health. Help us establish some guidelines and some processes that will improve quality and decrease cost. Well, that was the magic bullet for me, because I'm all about that. Helping with family members in healthcare, trying to navigate healthcare is landmines. It's just full of landmines. So I thought, yeah, we can do this. So we started working with the hardest environment there is, and that was 8,000 hospital employees strong. So me being an RN, I can tell you, we think we know everything. We're all about healthcare. Nobody in healthcare can tell us anything, but we're usually the most unhealthy people. We're the most stressed out. We're the overweight, and every respiratory therapist I've ever met stands outside the smokes before they come back in and do suctioning for their ventilator patients. So it was a right environment. I'll just put it that way. But since that time in '99, we started to grow outside of our community, not just inside of our community, with our physician resources there. We had some third-party administrators and some brokers saying, can you duplicate what you're doing here in the community? The healthcare trend, the true medical trend, with all outliers included for this 8,000 live employer group, hospital group, flattened. In over 5 years, they did not have an increase. They were less than 3% increase for 5 straight years. Actually, we're at the point of 13 years where their trend has been under 5% for that entire time. Very little benefit changes except adding wellness to that structure. We did a wellness program with their HealthPlex on site that we then started bringing in other employers in the community. The key was education. The key was educating the physician as well as the members and the employer. And being a physician organization, we bring in those physicians to educate the other physicians. Those of you in here that have worked with physicians know that the only ones that can tell them anything are their exact peer. It cannot be a neurosurgeon talking to an ophthalmologist. It can't be a primary care doctor talking to a general surgeon because they don't know anything. So we know to communicate, you've got to have that peer involvement, which was very important for us. Same thing when you're talking to the employees. I knew that I had to have staff that could communicate with the employees, from the blue collar, white collar, purple collar, gray collar, whatever kind of collar it was. We have employer groups nationally that are not even graduates of high school. A lot of them cannot read, all the way up to those that speak 3 or 4 languages in the company. So I was looking for staff that are all registered nurses, and they met some support staff that really understood the clinical side, that knew disease structure, that knew how to understand and to communicate modifiable risk. So when we started growing outside of our own community, that's really where the health and wellness side of that started. We started getting calls from some payers. We do delegated management in our community from with some payers there with Coventry. We started getting some calls from CEOs that were fully insured that said, you know, I can't get data or anything because I'm fully insured, but I want wellness. Can you do this on a smaller scale? Does it have to be 8,000? Does it have to be 2,000? Because I've got 22 employees and I want some wellness. So we really do have 22 people all up to about 8,000 right now, all over. And that is the key. The program that you design is your program as an employer. It is not Doctors Direct or Biosignia coming in and saying, here's the program, this is what we offer, I hope it works for you. What we want to do is find out, what do you, the expert of the employee, know to be happening at your company, and how can we come alongside and embrace where you are today and help you design a program from the bottom up that your employees will buy into. So that is the whole structure of where we are with Dr. Direct. I think we've kind of talked already about that process. We are a full medical management company with some of our self-funded clients where we do the prior authorization, we do case management, disease management, and then the on-site wellness screenings followed by the health coaching. But since 2007, the majority of our growth has really been on the health and wellness side, where we do not do the prior authorizations or case management, but our model of on-site screening followed by the coaching and care management is where we're able to make a big impact. As you can see, Joe in my slide has expanded his size quite a bit. You noticed earlier on I was fussing at Mark because Jane was big and Joe was little. Through this presentation, Joe had eggs and bacon this morning. In fact, I think he's been eating that every morning. So Joe's kind of expanded a little bit. But this slide really just shows you the care model of how many different influences are coming in and out to impact Joe and his health. And sometimes, you know, poor Joe is standing in the middle going, I don't have a clue what I'm supposed to do here. One of the things that I think is important is I think healthcare today is moving toward the medical home, the ACO. That's all we're hearing about with healthcare. We did a pilot project in Valdosta, Georgia with Emory University. When they came in to do a review of what we had done with an employer in that area, we spent several days with them talking about the programs that we've designed, just like AIA is trying to bring to you guys today. And they basically said, do you realize that in this sense, what you've wrapped around with the employer and Biosignia and Doctors Direct with the data, that you're the medical home? And we were like, well, yeah, because we work with employers and we work with physicians every day, and the physicians simply do not have the infrastructure to be what is truly a medical home in their individual practices. They don't have the staff support. They don't have the financial support. And what we want to do is the physician drives the care. The physician sets the tone. The physician does the prescriptions. But what happens in between the one visit and the visit in 6 months is what gets lost. You have the members with high blood pressure or high cholesterol, and they go to their physician. The physician puts them on blood pressure medications and says, we'll see you back in 3 months to check on the progress there. Well, in between time, I'm taking my pill. I'm all about wellness. I'm taking my pill. I'm still eating everything out of the can with lots of salt. Just tell you, y'all probably don't have this issue up here in the north, but in the south, I had somebody tell me this. I said, do you cook with salt? Oh, no, we don't ever put salt in our vegetables. I said, you don't? No, we just cook with ham meat. Salt. That's where salt comes from. So you have to step back and realize where people are with that understanding. I'll give you another example of that, of where people really don't put the two things together about what they're doing in their lifestyle and how that matches up to what's going on. Red meat. One of the questions on the Know Your Number tool is, how many servings of red meat do you eat per week? And we had some folks that might not be able to get into that door right there, and they were saying 0. I was like, I do think you probably eat some red meat. Let's figure out how to get that information out. So you don't eat any hamburger, bacon, or pork chops, or steak? Oh, Lord, yeah, I love it every day. Like, okay, but you've got 0 here. I want mine well done. I do not eat anything red. So what I'm telling you is, what you assume people understand is way less than the majority of what we understand from people when we're talking with them. They really don't get it. And the visual tool of Know Your Number shows them the picture, but then it requires the education underneath. The physician's offices, if some of you have a primary care doctor that is all about it, feel very blessed, because that just does not happen generally. The physicians will do the assessment, they'll see the numbers, they write the prescription, and get you back in for your follow-up. And there's not a lot of education that goes on after that. If you've got high cholesterol, you walk out and they say, you know, we're not going to put you on anything right now, but just be careful what you eat. And here's a flyer. Be on a low cholesterol diet. You walk out going, Cheerios, oatmeal, is that my life now? Is that what I have to do? That's where the health coaching component comes in. The follow-up call. I saw when you went to your doctor. Tell me what's going on. What did they tell you? Well, they told me to eat low cholesterol, but I don't know what that is. That's where you start the education process right there. And another example, and Mark, you can advance that. Another example from the education component is the diabetic. Somebody that's been a diabetic for years. At the screening, when we're doing the biometrics and we ask them, we see that yes, I'm a diabetic. We ask them, okay, we see, how long have you been a diabetic? 7 years. Okay, good. What was your last A1C? And they go, my what? Well, that's a very telling moment to the health coach, because an A1C should be done on every diabetic 3 to 4 times a year based on how fragile or brittle they are in their treatment. That is what a physician should be running. A lot of times they're doing that, but there's no education point between, I see the value, I'm the physician, I'm writing the treatment, the member's going to take the medication, but there's no correlation in between that explains if the level is high, here's what's happening over the last 90 days, and that's why this number is high. There's more sugar in your system than should be. So let's talk about what you're doing in between the doctor's visits that we can help improve your health. That's where the medical home concept wraps around and takes the action tool and the plan for Know Your Number and puts it into effect to the member's real life. The whole process there is really what we've already talked about. Data is key. If you're self-funded and you have the data, we import that data. We're looking for those gaps in care. We're matching those components up to the coaching pieces, the disease states. But we are doing just the same on the fully insured side. Without that data, from the claim side, but if you've got the clinical data from the Know Your Number component, you're identifying the people that aren't yet in the queue for your large claims. You're identifying those that are at risk, that have not had a disease state yet, or that are right on the edge. The other piece you're doing from our screenings, we include an A1C, that test I just mentioned, on everybody. Traditionally, it was always just done on the diabetics to see their progression of disease. Since 2009, it's been recommended by the Diabetes Association to do it on everyone as a screening tool. So we've been doing that and identifying about 60% more people that are in the pre-diabetes stage that one single fasting blood sugar was missing. That A1C number measures the amount of sugar attached to the bloodstream over the last 90 days. So it's hard to fool that picture, whereas one single blood sugar can be give you, a false positive or a false negative. So those pieces together allow us to really impact the member in all forms of that communication. We've got the interactive participant portal for the population that is very much into the computer-based technology. We've got phone call follow-ups. We've got mailings, old-fashioned mail. We still do leave the envelopes and put stamps on and send stuff out to members as well if they want that in that form. The key is meeting that individual at the place where they are and working with them on that. We've really, I try to talk through instead of have you read slides or anything, but basically the whole process that we think works the very best, although we know as an employer, you know where you are in health and where you may need assistance. But sort of basically like a three-pronged approach is what we've identified and where we're seeing the biggest return on investment. The average being about 3-to-1 return. On-site wellness screening really works very well. You make that connection. I'll give you an example. Our team is up here this week screening a couple of groups in your community. And yesterday, Mark and I stopped by to check on, see how things were going. And they said it's been really good. We really only had one lady kind of come in with a little bit of attitude, didn't want to screen, and what are you doing this for? Is this private? Who's going to get this information? The standard HIPAA questions that we always get. So Letha, one of the screeners that I'm telling you, Letha can get blood out of a turnip if she had to. So she takes the lady to the screening area where the privacy screens and is chatting with her. In a few minutes, they were telling me all they heard was laughter back there, just laughing and cutting up. And the lady left. Letha knew all about her grandchildren, the next birthday party they were having. But what she was able to do is break through that barrier and create some trust. And the lady asked her when she got ready to leave, are y'all coming back next year? When will I hear from you? So that's the key. The key is being able to show them your information is private. Your employer will never see your information, but what we're going to do, I'm the one that's going to call you and follow up and talk with you about your results. So that piece is very key if it's doable. We also know that there are sometimes that's not doable when you've got locations all over everywhere. But we'll work with you to figure out the best way to integrate that program. The key is getting the Know Your Number results done so you've got an action plan from the individual member standpoint all the way to the employer health plan. Then that physician interaction is very key. We're not diagnosing, we're not prescribing. If your results show that your blood pressure is really high, but you say, oh, my blood pressure is never high, I'm just nervous at the screening. Okay, tell us what your normal blood pressure is. Well, 2 years ago when I had it checked at the doctor's office, it was pretty normal. Well, that tells us they really don't know what their blood pressure is, so that's an education process. We check their labs. We've got a blood sugar of 500, and they say that they were fasting. So the first callback is to very gently ask them, were you really fasting or did you drink a Mountain Dew and eat a honey bun before you came to the screening? Because blood sugar is a little elevated. Well, then we hear this, well, you know, I have been really tired. Have you been getting up at night to use the bathroom? Yeah, I get up several times during the night. Well, those are classic symptoms of diabetes that's not yet diagnosed. So the next piece there is we're going to send these results right now to your physician. You wrote the name of your doctor on the form. We're going to send that over there. You need to call and make an appointment. Then our nurses are calling that physician's office and talking with the nurse to say, we did a screening on behalf of the employer. This member says they're your patient. Is that correct? Yes, it is. Well, here's the deal. We're going to send you some labs. We're really concerned about them. So now we've come alongside the physician and said, we want to give you this information so you can act on it, and we're going to try to help you get that member to the point of treatment. So then we're following up with that member. Did you go to your appointment? How did it go? Did you understand what's going on? And I can give you hundreds of examples where people are calling back saying, I went, thank you so much, it helped so much to go. I didn't have a clue. I thought I was just working overtime and just really tired, and all along I already had a condition I didn't know about. So those pieces are very important. The third piece is that ongoing process of the health coaching. Because if you're only touching them 2 or 4 times a year, there are a lot of programs out there that are all about, get the screening done, and the coach is going to call you 3 times this year, and it'll cost you X. Well, what we have found is there's a lot of telemarketer feeling around that process. So when I get the phone call, yeah, I'm doing everything I should, thanks for calling back, hurry up and get off the telephone. What we're trying to do is interface with that individual and develop that plan around what their needs are. I may have somebody that says, I want to lose weight and I need some accountability. I don't want to go to Weight Watchers, but I would like somebody to help me with that. Then we're calling that person weekly, or they're calling in. You kind of do a program back and forth where I'll call you this week, you call me next week, we'll have you an accountability partner, we'll set something up. So those programs are designed to meet the needs of the individual, but the overall goal as the employer is to avoid the disease or slow down the progression of the complication and get the members engaged so they're feeling, this is a wellness program that my company really does care about me here at the point of my employer. All of the programs that we do are part of our health coaching. So there's not a purchase of a weight loss program, of a smoking cessation or tobacco cessation program, stress management. It really is designed around what the findings are on each Know Your Number. So everybody's program or goal setting is going to be different. We really have found that by keeping it participation-based, where you're incentivizing them to participate in the program, in the health coaching, we are reaching the outcomes that you desire without it being a very negative, punitive process where if you're still smoking, you pay a surcharge. If your BMI is not X by a certain date, you pay extra. Those types of programs, while I understand why some employers go that route, what we have found is when you build the relationship, you really engage them where they are, we're getting the same outcomes, but with much higher participation rates and much higher satisfaction rates. So that's sort of why we drive it in that fashion. As long as you design a legal program, we can administer it if you want it to be outcomes-based. And I'll use that term legal because these days nobody really knows what legal is, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. The individual, I think I pretty much described for you the individual level of engagement and how that translates into the population. I do want to give you an example from yesterday. In fact, when Mark and I were on the way up here, I got an email from one of our nurses at the office. We started working with a hospital group in October. We screened them in October, and there's about 500 of them. And they have designed this 3-phase program where they had to see their physician by the end of the year. They gave them 90 days from the screening to follow up their physician. And they have to work with the health coach ongoing. Kim called her, the member, in follow-up because the lady had some surgery. So she called her to check on her. And the lady said, I want to be on your website. I need to be a testimony. And Kim said, what is going on? She said, I've lost 66 pounds. And she said, because of this program, and I even have my physician on record for saying this, she was exercising like crazy. She saw the profile and was one of those, like Mark described, that moment of, oh my gosh, I've got to do something. And she really started eating well. She started bicycling. Well, she started exercising, and she said she had this pooch and she couldn't get rid of it. She couldn't understand why. And she tried and tried and tried. Went to the physician, and she had a mass. She had a tumor. She went in for surgery. It was cancerous. The physician told her that if she had not acted on this and lost the weight, she would probably not have found out until her disease had progressed. Because the physician link visit was important to the employer, they had to go to the physician and follow up. She had had her exam, and they still didn't find anything. But once she started losing weight is when they were able to identify this mass. Have removed the mass, lymph nodes are clear. She said that her whole family now has joined the bandwagon. Our healthy eating newsletters that we send out, she's mass producing on for everybody in her I think in her church, at the hospital, everywhere. She's sort of a surrogate Doctors Direct employee, I think, because she is out there really promoting it. But her husband has lost 25 pounds, probably just because he's having to eat and ride the bicycle with her, but now he's on board as well. Her sister is engaged in wellness now too. So if you just look at that one employee, what is saved from that one employee down the line from a cost standpoint from the employer, much less what it's done for her life and her life expectancy and her quality of life going forward. So there are a lot of examples like that we can give you. That what we realize is that it is the relationship building with the employer. It is the relationship building with the employee, with the spouse, with whichever member you choose to have participate in a wellness program. Here are some of the stats that support what I've been telling you about the program. Our nurses are clinical based. What that means is we drive our education based on true clinical facts. We're not necessarily the 20-year-old aerobics instructor at Gold's Gym that's rah-rah, get on the bandwagon. We're trying to explain to you why it's important to do that. There's a lot more than just wanting to look and feel good. There are a lot of health reasons underneath. And a lot of times when people understand that, they're a lot more engaged because they've not put those two pictures together. And that's what the Know Your Number tool does. And then we reinforce that with the coaching. And I think this basically, what is our difference in our program? Why do we do it in this fashion? We've got proven evidence for 13 years now. We think by coming alongside you and helping you design what you know to be true for your employees is the key. We can give you examples of what has worked and what has not worked for other folks. But in the end, the design of the program is your decision, and we'll come alongside you and help administer that program to the best of our ability, giving you data on the backside of that so you can act on it year over year to decide, is it working? Am I putting efforts in the right place? And where do we go from here?
I know we got to wrap up and just have a few questions, but can you just talk briefly about two things? One is, I'm not sure it came through, that the nurse relationship that you come on site in your preferred model, doesn't have to be this way, but in your preferred model, you come on site and establish the relationship like you talked about yesterday.
Yes.
So when the person gets the call back, they've already talked to that nurse and they know who they're
That's
talking
right. They're talking to the person that met with them face to face. So they're building on that relationship, and we're able to, a lot of times when people get that phone call initially, everybody's saying, who are you again? Because they may not remember the name. And that's when you remember we were on site screening just a couple of weeks ago. Oh, yeah, I remember that. So that sort of resets that relationship. And then that individual is the one that follows that member throughout the whole program.
And then the other thing is that your preferred method is also the blood draw rather than the finger stick.
Yes, that's right, Kevin. We do believe that the consistency of the venipuncture has been proven in a head-to-head study for us. We know that some people might not like that in the very beginning. They're kind of put off by that, and I'll tell you, it's mostly men that don't like to be stuck. Although Ashley, raise your hand, girl. Ashley does not like to be stuck. But we do get if you do a finger stick, you have to be, the equipment that you have has to be calibrated. You have to have the right technique to do that, because if you're lancing wrong or too deep or too shallow, or you're squeezing the finger, you get a lot of interstitial fluid. You're not really getting the serum, and it can give you a lot of false positives and false negatives. So we do a venipuncture draw, but we have our own phlebotomist that we bring with us and are part of our wellness team that do our own blood draw, and it is run through LabCorp Corporation of America, so it's not run in our office in the bathroom in Fayetteville, North Carolina, or anything. It's run through a verified lab at LabCorp. So, and that's another point to that, Kevin, is if you have situations where you may have a trucking company, you may have salespeople that are out on the road, they can actually take the requisition that we can mail them and go to any LabCorp that's closest to them, walk in, have their blood drawn, and those results come to us within 24 hours. So we know that there are instances where there are people spread out or can't make the screening event, and we'll do a self-report packet for them to accommodate that as well.
I think another key thing with the LabCorp is when physicians see the LabCorp results, they don't question it. Yeah. Whereas if it's a finger stick, they can't validate. And they will rerun. They'll rerun. So you're just kind of doubling up your costs. So historically, I think coming from their perspective actually was a benefit, because physicians, when they see LabCorp requests, they know it was run in a certified lab, because that's the ones they use.
Yeah, you don't want a double cost, and we have found that generally with the finger stick method, and they will redraw that blood if there's any question about it being too high or too low, that you're incurring the cost then under the health plan because they're drawing.
So let's just open up some questions if we have them. And one thing I failed to mention at the beginning, which I wanted to, was that much of this work we've been doing the last 3 years with self-funded clients. One of the things we're very excited about is we think that this can overlay into fully insured groups, which is why a lot of you are here today. So let's, any questions for folks?
I will mention, if you're fully insured, one of the things that we've noticed for self-funded is, we have the claims data, so generally it's easier to look at and say, are we making an impact? And where the fully insured, you don't have that piece. When we communicate a return on investment to you, we give you both perspectives of clinical as well as the claims projection if we have those. So if you're fully insured and the data components we are working with are the biometrics, we will show you the changes there. There are estimated dollar savings amounts from organizations like the American Diabetes Association, if you're able to drop that A1C by a percentage. There are American Heart Association numbers if you're able to lower the BMI, if you're able to lower the blood pressure. So we're able to give you, that's more of a soft dollar review, but it is a clinical change of improvement, as well as the comparison tool on the aggregate report for Know Your Number. You'll get a look at what did I look like last year, and now that we've rescreened as a group, what do we look like, and was there any lower projection in that 5-year projection of cost as well? So you do get both pictures there.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because a lot of the employers we work with are saying, I believe in this, I want to do it, but how do I really measure it?
How do I know? That's right.
And that's one of the things we got so excited about. This program can help measure that impact.
Yes.
Both have the same question. Is there a way to, how do you incentivize employees to participate? I'm assuming from an employer's standpoint, you can't make this mandatory, or can you?
If you do it on a participation base, you can require that they screen, as long as it's not linked to any outcomes. It would be basically, yes, we want everybody to participate this year, and we're making it mandatory for the company. What we find to be the most effective in our experience over the last 13 years is when it's linked to the premium. So if they're part of the health plan and they're paying a premium, we still suggest, even if you do a participation versus an outcomes base, that you stay within the HIPAA regulations of the Safe Harbor rule, which is 20% difference in your premium. And we've had some conversations with Ashley and Kevin about that, but that number is actually going up under healthcare reform. That'll be up to 30%, I believe, in 2014. But it's not the contribution to the member, it's your total cost of that employee health care. So that's what we've seen to be most effective, and what most of our groups are doing. If they do that three-pronged approach where you do the screening, do the physician's visit, and then show that you're actively participating throughout the year, they do sort of a mid-year change as well. So if they screen and see the physician, they get the discount, and they keep that for about 6 months. And during that 6 months, we're working with the individual, setting goals, seeing the progress, and then we'll do a report back to you in that 6-month period to say, here are the people that are compliant and here are those that are not. You don't get to know what goals the individual works on, but you'll get a report that says, you know, we've got 18 people we're working on diabetes goals, we've got 67 people that are working on weight loss and exercise, and here's where the overall group is. But the report you get back is not identified based on the condition. It would just say, Mark Ruby is compliant, Tina Wise is compliant, Joe Smith is not compliant. Well, if Joe's not compliant, he gets that warning letter of, they're telling me you're not doing what you're supposed to do and you're going to lose your discount until it's time for the screening again, and then you'll have the option to participate. One of the things we're very strong about is if you have risk factors, if you have chronic disease, whether you participate or not is not changing that factor. So even if the member says, you know, I've lost my discount, I didn't do anything, we'll try to reach out to them and try to re-engage them at that time, instead of just waiting and ignoring them, because their condition probably is getting worse. So it's still trying to build a relationship to get them back in to say, okay, let's start working on it now. You'll have your discount back in 6 months. That's one of the scenarios. It is totally up to you, and we can help you, you know, work through those processes. But the incentive approach on the premium discount has been what we have found to be most effective. We did have a sawmill in Georgia that the first year they did $10 Walmart gift cards to everybody, and they had 85% participation. I will tell you that is a rarity. I've never seen that happen any other time whatsoever. But you have to judge based on your population too, and what speaks to them.
And we've also found, and I think this is where our partnership comes into play. Tina was mentioning that they were just screening one of our groups here this week. And it is an auto parts manufacturer, multiple shifts, and their concern was, how are we going to get people to sign up for this? And they wanted the same thing, how do we make this mandatory? So what we did is Melissa and Faye, they went on site, and at every shift, and this was at all hours of the day, gave a quick pre-shift 10-minute meeting, and we didn't really pose it that it was mandatory or not. It's, hey, we're here to sign you up. And we had an overwhelming response. And it wasn't really a position that, you know, they do a premium differential, and we also gave out gift cards, actually. But that's part of our partnership, too, that we will be there on site to say, here, we're going to give a 10-minute, if you give Ashley and Melissa 10 minutes, they'll be here, and then once you're done, we'll sign you right up for a time slot, and then it's taken care of. So it's not, you're not really giving them an option. So we found that that's really effective too. So that's, you know, kind of the partnership and some of the things that we've learned along the way.
And good feedback from a primarily male population over there so far.
Absolutely.
Several of them already asking, you know, are you coming back next year? We're going to do this again. Will you be calling me? Who's going to help me? So that was good to hear that they were interested in wanting that follow-up and excited that, you know, this is a great benefit that my employer is giving to me. So that sort of sets the tone, too, with the meetings that that Ashley and Melissa and all those folks did from AIA to explain it is an added benefit that the employer is giving to you, and there's benefits all around for that. So it is definitely part in the marketing and the presentation of that.
I think we probably have to wrap it up. I'm sure there's questions on pricing and so forth, and there's all many different ways to do this, which we can talk about individually. And I think one of the reasons we filmed this today is I know sometimes you guys go back and have to talk to other people and they don't really understand what you're talking about, but we're going to have this on YouTube, a YouTube channel, I think, is our plan. So, and we're also hoping that with our carrier partners, we're going to talk them into actually giving us claims data for fully insured groups that we can marry with this to make this even more powerful. So we're going down that road as well. So thank you for coming. And if you do have other questions, you want to hit these guys, we're going to be here for a while.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.